In the United Kingdom, you want to end on a humorous note?
Yes, go on.
Well, I don't know how humorous some people regard it. They've got Costa Coffee, which viewers of Coronation Street will know, because there's a bit of product placement or something.
Oh, is there?
And one of its
Trust you on that, Jim. Trust you.
One of its, no, I haven't watched it for years, but I heard. And one of its radio ads talking about what to have for breakfast, the voiceover for this Costa Coffee ad said, "Oh, there's a great deal on ripen at home avocados. Sure, they'll be as hard as a rock for the first 18 days, 3 hours and 20 minutes, and then they'll be ready to eat for about 10 minutes, and then they'll go off." And the ad suggested people head along to Costa and have a bacon roll or egg muffin instead. So a bit of a laugh, you might think.
I think that's really funny, and also a fact. That is true about avocados.
Yes, and truth is an absolute defence.
Yes.
The UK's Advertising Standards Authority said this wording suggests that avocados were a poor breakfast choice and that a bacon roll or egg muffin would be better. And it ruled the ad must not be broadcast again. We told Costa to ensure future ads did not condone or encourage poor nutritional habits nor disparage good dietary practice.
I don't know why they're saying that a bacon roll is a bad thing. That seems crazy.
Reporter Joyce puts this into the category of PC gone mad, but in fact it stops being people being able to make digs and have jokes.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I mean, that sounded like a fun ad to me, and I don't think that I would change my mind and never eat another vegetable because they told me that avocados are only ripe after 28 days and they're only ripe for 10 seconds.
10 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes. Oh, was it? Oh, heaps of time.
And before we go, PC gone mad again, clapping has been replaced with jazz hands at Manchester University Student Union events because loud noise may be a problem for those with sensory issues and could trigger anxiety.
You know, they're not really jazz hands. It's the deaf sign language for applause, which I'm doing for you on the radio, which is not very helpful.
No, it's illustrative to me, although I knew it already. My question to you, Michelle, is whether you'll need to rethink your own needs for audience approval.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's music to my ears. It's feeding me.
Yeah, that's what you need, let's be honest.
And I think it's really unfair to the visually impaired if we're not allowed to make that noise with our clappy hands. Do both. I say do both. Everybody has a turn. Everybody should make their own choice.
As our panel, thanks everybody. Here's Checkpoint.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Alex Perrottet. Thanks for joining us. On tonight's program, New Zealand joins Britain and Australia in laying the blame for a wave of global cyber attacks at the door of Russian military intelligence. We'll talk soon to the director of the GCSB. The latest from Indonesia as aid workers scramble to help homeless and orphaned children, and New Zealand announces more aid. The Health Minister wants to classify synthetic drugs as Class A, giving police more powers, but will that solve the scourge that's seen one person die recently from a bad batch? Parliamentary Services bad news for the National Party, which wanted to broaden the scope of the inquiry into Simon Bridges' expenses, and will go live to preview the APRA Silver Scrolls being held tonight at Auckland's Spark Arena.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The Prime Minister says New Zealand is now willing to call out Russia for its involvement in international cyber attacks. The GCSB is backing new accusations by Britain that Russia's military intelligence agency has been trying to undermine Western democracies with a series of attacks. Back in April, Jacinda Ardern would not join Five Eyes partners in directly condemning Russia after a spate of cyber attacks, saying she would await advice from the GCSB. Now she says she has that advice and confirmation.
We've already seen some discussion around cybersecurity attacks already. This is acknowledging that there is evidence to demonstrate who has been at fault here, and we need to call out that behaviour when it occurs.
Jacinda Ardern, the head of the GCSB, Andrew Hampton, says the reason Five Eyes partners have gone public today over Russian cyber attacks is to send the message that all countries are expected to stick to the rules. The National Party says reclassifying just 2 synthetic compounds as Class A drugs will not stop those making synthetics. The Health Minister, David Clark, says the reclassification of 2 of the most commonly detected synthetics will give the police greater powers to search for and seize the drugs. He admits that with more than 600 compounds used to make synthetics, it's impossible to keep on top of them all, but says this is a logical place to start. Nationals leader Simon Bridges says drug makers can easily get around the law and wider reform is needed.
We would say to the government, go further, take more advice and be wider on this Class A issue so that the bad guys, the manufacturers, can't just change their recipes.
Nationals leader Simon Bridges. A new study has found babies with life-threatening heart disease are more likely to survive if the condition is picked up before birth, but researchers say not enough women receive an antenatal diagnosis. For the study, researchers from Auckland University and Starship Child Health analysed more than 250 cases of congenital heart disease over 12 years. During that time, one baby diagnosed before birth died, compared to 11 diagnosed following birth. Lead researcher Elsa Clutie says early diagnosis is essential, as it can allow for arrangements to be made for women to give birth at a specialist hospital. Māori are more likely to suffer non-fatal injuries from vehicle crashes and assaults. Figures just released by Stats NZ show they suffered crash injuries at a rate of nearly 68 per 100,000 people last year, 67% higher than the rate of 40 for the total population. They also experienced 37 serious assaults per 100,000 people compared to 12 for the general population. A Stats NZ analyst, Fiona O'Reilly, says the new figures are surprising.
When we investigated further, it's the stark increases in certain categories and the different structure that we've found, I think the best word is sobering.
Fiona O'Reilly. The figures come from a study by Otago University's Injury Research Prevention Unit. The Ministry of Education says it's working with a Whanganui school where allegations of bullying by a teacher have sparked an exodus of pupils. Parents say 23 children have been withdrawn from Kaitoki School this year and 18 may not return in the new year. The school normally has a roll of about 100. With more on this, here's our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin.
A Whanganui man has told RNZ his grandchildren have been pulled from the school. He says there have been complaints of pupils being yelled at and being told they would never amount to anything. Another caregiver says she complained to the police about the physical, verbal and emotional abuse her 11-year-old had endured, but no charges were laid. The ministry says it has received one complaint and others have been made directly to the school. The school has been unavailable for comment. Ko Robin Martin tēnei.
The annual Silver Scroll Awards for Songwriting will be given out in Auckland this evening. Finalists for the top prize are Chelsea Jade, Marlon Williams, Troy Kingi, the Best and Unknown Mortal Orchestra. Other awards are for Exceptional Waiata, Contemporary Composition and Music for Film and Television. Tonight you can hear rolling coverage of the Spark Arena ceremony on RNZ National from 7 and on our website at rnz.co.nz. It's 5:04. Sport. The All Blacks welcome back captain Kieran Reid for this weekend's clash with the Springboks in Pretoria. There are 4 changes to the starting 15 as they seek revenge for their shock loss to the Boks in Wellington. Joe Porter has more.
Skipper Kieran Reid is back at number 8 in place of Adi Savea, who drops to the bench despite starring in last week's win in Argentina. Centurion Owen Franks takes over from Ufa Tongafasi at prop, pushing the latter to the reserves, while halfback Aaron Smith is back in the starting side with TJ Perenara dropping to the bench. Jack Goodhue starts at centre with Ryan Crotty moving to the reserves. Bowden Barrett remains at first 5 and will be desperate to produce a winning performance to make up for his less than stellar display in their recent defeat in Wellington. Ko Joe Porter Aho.
7 years after playing her only international netball test, Sulu Fitzpatrick is back in the Silver Ferns. The Pulse defender is one of 3 new faces in the squad named today for the opening match of the Constellation Cup series against Australia in Brisbane on Sunday. She comes in alongside fellow defender Erekana Pedersen and young shooter Maya Wilson. Wilson replaces Amelia Ann Ekanasio, while the 2 others drop out. 2 drop out are Karen Berger and Elisa Peta Toiava. And the New Zealand Breakers will need to come from behind to win their pre-season basketball clash with NBA team the Phoenix Suns. Heading into the 4th and final quarter in Arizona, the Breakers trail by 15 points. That's the news.
taking the credit.
He simply appropriated Fred Trump's empire, his father's empire, and acted as if it was his own.
Taking on a pseudonym.
We make no apologies for having to go undercover because it showed some government agencies appear to be treating people differently based on who they are.
And taking teachers from overseas.
Rather than making teaching a sustainable, rewarding and valued career, we're going to see if we can find what we need offshore and just hope that we get by.
Bringing you the news. Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, a road safety campaigner says rural kids are still at risk from excessive speed limits outside schools. And after 10, one of the world's foremost sculptors, Tony Cragg, whose 5.5-metre tall creation is taking pride of place in Christchurch. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, rain, possibly heavy today, gradually easing tomorrow. Auckland, Coromandel, Waikato and Bay of Plenty, partly cloudy, isolated showers mainly afternoon and evening. Waitomo to Manawatu, including the central high country, cloudy periods with isolated afternoon showers today. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, isolated showers about the ranges and a few showers about southern Wairarapa tomorrow evening. Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington, cloudy periods, isolated showers tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine today, partly cloudy with a few showers tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, occasional rain, heavy at times south of the glaciers, but gradually easing to showers tomorrow. Canterbury, patchy rain, spreading north today, clearing south of Ashburton tomorrow. Otago and Southland, scattered rain today, mainly fine tomorrow, but a few showers about Southland and Clutha. For Fiordland, rain with heavy falls easing this evening, showers tomorrow, and for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with showers tomorrow evening. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much, Katrina. New Zealand has joined Britain and Australia in laying the blame for a wave of global cyber attacks at the door of Russian military intelligence, or called the GRU. The high-profile attacks targeted political, business and sporting organisations as well as the media. While the GCSB says New Zealand has not been the direct target of these activities, it is seeing, quote, a range of activity here that contains indicators which can be linked to Russian state actors. The Director General of the GCSB, Andrew Hampton, says businesses and organisations need to take responsibility for their own safety. I spoke to him a short time ago and asked him what provoked today's announcement.
The reason I'm talking today is because the New Zealand government is very concerned about this type of activity, and one of the things we can do to express our concern is to speak publicly with like-minded countries, calling out this type of behaviour and saying that we do expect all countries to comply with the appropriate modes of behaviour when it comes to cyber activity, to cyberspace.
Okay, so and in that release that you've sent out today, you list a number of things that have happened in the past. You go back to the Democratic Party's hacking in 2016. You even mention, I guess, what's it called, the malware one, Bad Rabbit, and of course the World Anti-Doping Agency's hacking of athletes' information. So these go back to 2016. I think there was even one that went back to 2015 there. Yeah. So how long have you known that these sorts of events have links to the Russian government?
We have known for some time, for several years, that
well, that's not really what we've got from our own government at times, is it? I mean, we had some very ambiguous statements earlier this year, but particularly ahead of the Prime Minister's trip to the European Union and to Europe about Russia's involvement in hacking. Do you share this information regularly with the government?
The government made a pretty strong statement earlier in the year regarding Russian cyber activity with regard to the NotPetya cyber attack. You may be aware of that. That was focused on the Ukraine, but it actually had a global impact. New Zealand added its voice to that of other like-minded countries calling out that type of behaviour, saying it's not acceptable. In terms of what the Bureau has seen, we release our annual cyber threat summary. The most recent one said that we had seen about 400 cyber incidents in the space of the 2016-17 year. Of those, 120 actually had indicators of state sponsors behind them.
And how many of them were from Russia? Can you tell us how many?
A significant number.
A significant number were from Russia, right. And you're also saying today that you're seeing a range of activity in New Zealand that contains indicators which can be linked to Russian state actors. Back at that time where those comments were made about the NotPetya attack, the Prime Minister said she was confident that there were no Russian spies in New Zealand. But really what you're saying is there are at least proxy Russian spies in New Zealand.
No, that's not what I'm saying. In the cyber world, you do not need to be resident in New Zealand in order to launch a cyber attack or to undertake malicious cyber activity. Indeed, New Zealand is subject to cyber attacks mostly from people who are resident outside of our country. So what our release is saying is that we have seen indicators, if you like, fingerprints of types of malware which the GRU is using, that's Russian military intelligence, is using with regard to these four organisations. We're seeing those same indicators in New Zealand. Fortunately, in the cases, at least the ones that we have seen, we have been able to disrupt that before they've been able to get on systems.
Okay, so we've got a fairly good track record there in terms of being able to defend ourselves. How confident are you, though, that we do have the right tools to keep mounting defences, given we've got some pretty formidable cyber enemies here like Russia?
You're dead right, and with regard to the threatscape, that there are significant cyber actors out there who don't necessarily share New Zealand's interests. That's the first point. Secondly, the nature of cyber threats are evolving at the same speed as technology is evolving, so it's constantly changing. We are fortunate as a country in that we have not been subject to a significant cyber event in the way many other countries have, including, as we discussed before, WannaCry and NotPetya. They didn't have a big impact on New Zealand, but that doesn't mean that we are safe from such attacks. And cybersecurity is a team sport. GCSB, we're focused on those high-end, persistent, complex threats, normally the state-sponsored ones. We have some capabilities which we think are providing a reasonable degree of protection. The government has recently agreed to extend the Cortex capabilities through a program called Malware Free Network to even more organisations. But the fact is, every individual, every business, they need to take responsibility themselves, because it may not be one of those state-sponsored actors that get you. It could be your low-end internet scam, or it could be a criminal actor.
Right, so you're saying that you're quite concerned, although you've got the right tools, you're asking the business community and everyone to take care. The vibe I'm getting from you really is that it's only a matter of time before New Zealand is the subject of one of these more advanced attacks.
Well, look, we see evidence of those types of actors on New Zealand networks all the time. Fortunately, they haven't been that successful at getting in. Part of keeping us safe from those attacks is, yes, the type of high-end capabilities that the Bureau can provide, the commercial products that are available, but it's also what people themselves do. The very basic stuff is the best stuff you can do to keep yourself safe. Update your password recently. Always make sure that you have the most recent security patches running on your system. Limit who you give access to your systems and to your devices. Be careful what you plug into it. Those quite basic mitigations will protect you from 85% of cyber issues.
That's the Director General of the Government Communications Security Bureau, Andrew Hampton. We also asked him whether the GCSB would seek to broaden its powers here in light of the threats and in light of moves in the UK to remove encryption from some social media apps. Now, he said the powers brought in with the 2013 Telecommunications Interception Capability and Security Act, known as the Spying Act, are sufficient. We will have more on this after 6. It's 16 minutes past 5. New Zealand is providing an extra $3 million to the emergency response on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi after last week's devastating earthquake and tsunami. More than 1,400 people have been killed, but authorities say that number is likely to grow. Authorities have given a deadline of tomorrow when they say they will stop searching for any more survivors. Relief supplies are starting to flow into the devastated city of Palu, but rescuers are still trying to reach more remote areas which remain cut off. The Foreign Minister Winston Peters is in the capital, Jakarta, at the moment, and he's due to meet government ministers today and tomorrow. He says New Zealand military is also in Indonesia helping local authorities with the response.
We're using our C-130s to bring generators, collapsible water containers in their thousands and thousands of tarpaulins, which is immediate sort of relief. We have to use those planes as well to take food and other things there and be on standby. So it's a matter of fitting into the relief effort.
Winston Peters. Tim Costello is the Chief Advocate for World Vision Australia. He's just arrived in Palu, where he spoke to me from a distribution centre.
What surprised me was a spanking new airport that was so damaged, and that obviously really delayed early relief efforts, and the knock-on effect was people were hungry for 3 or 4 days. They were looting shops, they were looting petrol stations that now are guarded by the military with queues of cars 2-3 kilometres long. Now a trickle of aid is getting through because we're starting to see Hercules C-130s land on that damaged airport that I came in on. Right there at the airport is Tent City, a massive number of people. I spoke to 7 families in one tent. There would have been about 15 kids and about 14 adults, and they just said, look, our homes were destroyed, we have no money, we have no plan, we don't know how we're going to start again. We're just here really dependent on the aid and distribution that World Vision and others are doing. And it really hit me that we're at the end of the search and rescue phase. We know people were alive, but without excavating heavy equipment, 6 days on now, there's no chance of getting them. We're in this recovery stage of keeping people warm and under shelter. We're distributing blankets and tarps and family hygiene kits, and military is controlling the food distribution. And then the recovery period will go for the next 2 years, seeking to rebuild a city that in part has been totally flattened.
Wow, and really compounding the tragedy there, as you said, that people probably did survive, but they just couldn't be reached in time from the lack of machinery and probably personnel. But we've heard as well that last night there was a volcanic eruption on the island. Have you seen much around that, and has that made things worse?
No, look, that's nearly 900 kilometres away from here, but you know, talk about the unholy trinity, an earthquake first, a tsunami, and now a volcano. You start to think, what's the fourth horseman of this apocalypse that's going to hit this island? We cannot control earthquakes and tsunamis and volcanoes. What we can control is our response to that, saying these people deserve hope and dignity. We mustn't, look away. We must be generous and give and show them that in their moment of need, there's solidarity, that they're not alone. And that's really the message that we are spreading with our practical care. And a real focus, I might add, on children, setting up child-friendly spaces. So many kids whose parents, they don't know where they are, they're separated, or maybe they've died. 1,400's now the death toll, and that will go up. And in these child-friendly spaces, protecting them, because in chaos. Traffickers, paedophiles take advantage of chaos. But most importantly, dancing, painting, getting them to express the trauma just so they know that they are safe. And the trauma, at least for the moment, is behind them.
Right, and that gives a bit of hope in the sense that initial trauma's behind them. You talked about giving people what they needed, but as well that dignity, often times in the wake of these disasters, just out of desperation, you see a lack of dignity there. We heard of people standing in front of a military Hercules, stopping it from leaving just yesterday because of a fear of just a lack of food and water and the basic necessities. What's the vibe there at the moment as far as you can see in terms of people's desperation, or are they at least getting those basics?
Yeah, so the desperation levels have reduced, thankfully, because they were the first 3 or 4 days. Great anger. Where is our government? Does anyone care? The aid is trickling in. I would describe it as a 1 centimetre pipeline when it needs to be a 10-metre pipeline. I'm at a distribution centre where people were told there'll be a distribution today, and then it hasn't happened, and they're starting to wonder. So it can trigger into anger again very, very quickly.
That's World Vision's Tim Costello in Palu. We heard earlier that the Indonesian government will have a deadline of tomorrow. Tomorrow it will stop searching for more survivors, but a whole lot of work still to come there in Palu and other parts of Sulawesi. It's just on 23 minutes past 5. The White House says the US President Donald Trump was only stating the facts, not mocking a woman who has accused his Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault. During a campaign rally yesterday, Mr. Trump mimicked the testimony given by Christine Blasey Ford to a Senate committee last week, to the delight of the crowd. His actions drew heavy criticism from Democrats as well as some in his own Republican Party. Meanwhile, the FBI investigation into the allegations facing Mr. Kavanaugh is expected to be released within the next 24 hours. The BBC's North American editor John Sopel has the details.
For 2 weeks now since Christine Blasey Ford's accusations of sexual assault against Brett Kavanaugh emerged, the White House has kept a tight lid on its response. Indeed, the day after her distressing testimony, the president was full of praise and respect for her.
I thought her testimony was very compelling, and she looks like a very fine woman to me.
But last night at a rally in Mississippi, that all changed. Restraint? Forget it. Donald Trump cracked his knuckles and was ready to fight. He mocked Dr. Ford.
How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. What neighborhood was it in? I don't know. Where's the house? I don't know. Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know. But I had 1 beer. That's the only thing I remember. And a man's life is in tatters. A man's life is shattered.
And Trump supporters we spoke to at the rally were singing the same tune.
If I was a victim, like she says she was, you think I'm going to go to my politician? I'm going to go to authority.
I think that something happened, but I think she's got the wrong person.
Anybody can sound believable. If I sit here and tell you, oh, poor me, I'm like, oh, this happened to people. You sound good, but you got to have corroborating evidence.
And despite the controversy his remarks have provoked, there's no rowing back at the White House today.
He's pointing out factual inconsistencies. Do you have corroboration for her claims? Have you found, can you fill in her memory gaps, her factual inconsistencies? That is part of the evidence gathering process in any hunt for truth.
But this will be decided by senators on Capitol Hill, and key Republicans who will vote on the outcome were left uneasy.
To discuss something this sensitive at a political rally is just it's just not right. It's just not right. I wish he hadn't have done it. I just say it's kind of appalling.
The vote, when it comes, will be tight. Naturally, all attention has focused on those Republicans opposing Brett Kavanaugh. But in the opposite direction, there are Democrats in strongly Republican areas facing re-election in a few weeks' time who might calculate their only chance of political survival is to vote for him. And in this town, survival tends to come first. All eyes are now on FBI headquarters. Investigators are reported to have finished their supplemental background check on Brett Kavanaugh. The report won't be published, but each senator will be able to read a copy. On that basis, they'll cast their vote and bring this tortuous and profoundly divisive episode to a close.
The BBC's John Sopel in Washington. It's 5:26. The government plans to crack down on its procurement in the construction industry in a bid to get rid of a culture of price undercutting. It unveiled the crackdown in Auckland this morning as part of its plan to address skills and labour shortages in the construction industry. Our reporter Annika Smith was there and filed this report.
For many decades, our sector, which employs 1 in 10 people in Aotearoa, has had a boom-bust issue. It gains people and skills in boom times and it loses them during down times.
Minister for Building and Construction, Jenny Salisa, announced the Construction Skills Action Plan in front of a Housing New Zealand development in Otara. It took just 3 weeks to construct the 8-unit building using materials that were manufactured off-site. Ms Salisa says it's a type of innovation the country is crying out for.
A workforce that is so vital to our economy and its people deserves coordination and attention if we are to create real transformation. These initiatives work together to increase the profile of construction, the number of people entering it, and the businesses and investment in training and development.
The government expects to secure 4,000 more construction workers in the next 3 years, and Ms Salisa says an additional 1,500 people will be trained while working on government infrastructure projects.
Lifting the capacity and capability of the construction workforce is key to delivering a lot of our government's priorities. It is critical that the government takes leadership in addressing our skills shortage in construction industry.
Getting tough on the government's procurement process is a top priority under the government's plan. Economic Development Minister David Parker says contractors currently undercut their competitors by not paying to train their workers and offering the cheapest tender. He says these same contractors then poach staff off employers who have invested in training when they win the contract.
It's completely wrong that they can do that at the moment, and you should ask yourself, why hasn't this been fixed previously? And is that one of the reasons why we have got a shortage of homes in New Zealand and one of the reasons why the cost of construction keeps going up?
Mr Parker says the change means head contractors will have to up their game, a sentiment echoed by Jeremy Soul, the chief executive of the electrical training company. Mr Soul says it will create a sense of certainty in the industry.
I think it's time that there was a reset in the construction industry. There has been a race to the bottom and lowest margin, and you've seen the impact of that right across the sector. In some way it will create government as maybe a preferred client, which means that other clients will have to lift their game to the same level if they want to get a shot at the available resources.
Warwick Quinn, head of the Building and Construction Industry Training Organisation, says small firms still need to be encouraged to take on apprentices.
We know for small firms, taking on an apprentice is not a small ask, and we know in the first 12 to 18 months it costs them money, and so they're often loath to take that on because of the cost. We think if a little bit of incentive has helped, some funding for example, like all the other teachers, that might change their attitude towards it.
But National isn't convinced by the plan. Its building and construction spokesperson, Andrew Bailey, says it's frustrating and flawed.
To wait 12 months for what I see is a plan to create a plan to deal with the issue of building or attracting new skills into the sector is incredibly disappointing. Again, we've got nice, lofty statements, but nothing there.
Jenny Salisa says further announcements regarding the construction industry revamp will be made in the coming months. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Annika Smith aho.
It's 5:30 on Checkpoint. We've got a little bit of feedback, specifically about the GCSB and the Russia cyber attacks. I think it's fair to say that many of you are somewhat sceptical about the announcement today. Terry has got in touch, says good evening. It sounds to me that New Zealand is being forced to accept the UK and the USA's Russia phobia policy. That's one point of view. Peggy is on the same side of the fence. She's laughing. She says, ha ha ha, Alex, this Russia business is twaddle. If the GRU were involved in this stuff, we would never know about it at all. That's Peggy's point of view. Thank you for getting in touch. There's plenty of more. We will have more. Actually, we'll talk to a former GCSB boss after 6. Also coming up is structural racism to blame for Māori ending up behind bars, and how the Parliamentary Service has thrown a spanner in the works of National's leak investigation. That and a whole lot more coming up. But first, the news headlines with Katrina Batten.
The GCSB chief says the agency now has clear evidence that Russia's military intelligence agency is directing cyber attacks at organisations around the world. New Zealand spy agency is backing new British accusations that the GRU is using the attacks to undermine Western democracies. The advice from the GCSB means this country is now joining the other Five Eyes countries in condemning Russia. The Health Minister says reclassifying 2 of the most commonly found synthetic drugs will give the police greater powers, but it's not the whole answer. David Clark accepts more than 600 compounds are used to make synthetic drugs, making it impossible to keep on top of them. But he says the reclassification is a logical place to start. The National leader Simon Bridges says drug makers can easily get around the law and wider reform is needed. Nearly 130 jobs are set to go at the Hatamaki packaging plant in Henderson. The Hatamaki Group's plans to move parts of its business to Asia will affect 128 workers, but it hopes to employ some others in other parts of the business. E2 Union says it's a devastating blow for workers in Auckland who don't yet know who will stay and who will go. Leading water scientist Mike Joy says dwindling numbers of freshwater insects point to the dire state of the country's waterways. The annual River Quality Report by Land, Air, Water Aotearoa shows results are improving for 8 other water quality indicators. But macroinvertebrates, which are the major food source for native fish and birds, are likely to be degrading at 2 out of 5 sites. The annual Silver Scroll Songwriting Awards are to be given out in Auckland this evening. Chelsea Jade, Marlon Williams, Troy Kingi at the Bess and the Unknown Mortal Orchestra are in line to get the top prize. There are other awards for exceptional waiata, contemporary composition and music for television and film. RNZ National will have rolling coverage of the ceremony at Spark Arena, which you can hear on RNZ National on our website rnz.co.nz/music. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Katrina. Do you think this is a music fan that's got in touch? They say, OK, point taken. The Silver Scrolls are on tonight. Give it a rest, RNZ. Maybe they're not looking forward to it.
Yeah, they are. And we're very proud that we're giving it full coverage.
And Alex Bean is there, and we'll cross to him before we go tonight.
Good.
So we'll hear the very, very latest.
That'll
I think
be
he'll be with Moana Maniapoto and a bunch of others. So stay tuned for that just before 6:30. We're going to business now with Madison Reedy. Welcome.
Good evening.
How are you?
Very good. How are you?
Not too bad. Also, a trucking company seems to be going pretty well, heading towards a acquisition.
It is trucking along quite nicely. Thank you. Excuse the pun. This is about TIL Logistics. So this is a freight and logistics company. They have a pretty low profile. They listed on the NZX last year in an IPO share float, which we don't see many of those currently at the moment. So it sounds boring, but it's actually pretty cool. So I would say so myself.
Oh, I love a truck story.
They are essentially the oil of the economy. They do keep it moving, and the acquisition they announced today kind of proves that, really. So they acquired a company called Specialised Lifting and Transport Group, very long and tricky name, often called SLTG, which is a little bit easier to say. So they own Transcar, Machinery Movers and Huge Movers are their brands. And essentially what they do, which will now fall under TIL's umbrella, is what they do is they move big stuff to big places. So the likes of wind turbines, big ships and boats and things like that. So this company that they bought has that specialised gear. So now with that under TIL's roof, they now have the ability to do that. And that actually gives them a bit of a leg up against big Australian companies that come here, big Aussie freight and logistics companies that usually kind of rule the roost in that type of market. They can now compete against them. And that acquisition was for 19 million.
Right. Okay. Now, yesterday we talked about the NZX, and there's a bit of a stoush there. There was some harsh words said about it, and there seems to be, no, it's growing, this stoush. What's the latest? What's going on there?
Yeah, so it's certainly heating up and is at boiling point, I would say. Wow. So this is between Chris Swasbrook, who is he runs a fund called Elevation Capital. So he has elevated the stoush that he has pursued with the NZX, and the NZX chairman came back and said something today. He basically noted, what Chris had said. Essentially, the reason why Chris started this kind of Stausch, and he kind of came out slamming the NZX. He said it has very poor performance and compared it to the ASX, put out this big document called NZX Now and said, it needs to turn around its strategy now, needs to do better, needs to rid of its culture of wasteful spending. And as I said the other night, cited, a few of its staff going on kind of lavish trips overseas. He just says that's not good enough and more needs to be done. And he says in the past 48 hours, when we spoke about this last, that he's received a lot of support from other NZX shareholders. And he says that they've come to him and said, how about we all have a special meeting of shareholders and we, put all our heads together and come up with some ideas as to how we can join forces against the local share market. And he says that they're seriously considering doing that. And whatever that would, mean to the NZX, we're not sure. But this is what the NZX said today. So the chairman, James Miller, put out a statement saying that we too are impatient to deliver results for shareholders, but we're working hard on everything and we remain on track to deliver that strategy. Don't ask what that strategy is because they're giving more details in February next year, so I can tell you then.
Seems like a fairly straight-back response from the NZX.
It certainly was.
Otherwise, how are the markets performing?
The NZX Top 50 Index closed down about 0.5%. That's 37 points to close at 9,257. New Zealand dollars buying at 64.9 US cents, so the US dollar's gained again today, which isn't so good for us. The 91.6 are we buying at to the Australian and 50.2 to the British pence.
Great. Thank you very much. Madison Reedy there with the latest in the business world. At 23 minutes to 6, two of the most widely used synthetic drugs could be reclassified as Class A drugs alongside heroin and cocaine. The Health Minister, David Clark, says he'll be asking his Cabinet colleagues to support his push for the law change, which he says will give the police greater powers to stop the makers and the sellers of the drug. And while those working with users support that move, they say synthetics will continue to cause huge damage to communities until massive gaps in addiction services are also addressed. Anusha Bradley reports.
There are more than 600 different compounds used to make synthetic drugs, and Customs intercepts a new one each week. This has left lawmakers grappling with the question of how to ban and classify the drugs when recipes can be changed quickly by manufacturers to get around the law. Health Minister David Clark admits it's impossible to keep on top of every illegal drug, but says he'll be asking his Cabinet colleagues to support reclassification of two compounds known as AMB Fubinaca and 5F-ADB.
These two are the ones that we're looking at reclassifying because they are the majority of the market at the moment. Unfortunately, new substances come in nearly every week into the country. But we are doing the things we can logically do because this is a situation of dire concern.
A Cabinet briefing in July mooted the idea of moving synthetic drugs from the Psychoactive Substances Bill to the Misuse of Drugs Act, thereby increasing the maximum penalty for supplying the drug from 2 years in jail to 8. David Clark says while he's not in favour of harsher penalties for users, this change would give the police greater powers to stop those making and selling the drug.
The reclassification allows the police greater search and seizure powers, and we know that a health response requires being available to treat people who come forward with addiction issues, and it also involves disrupting supply.
In Napier, the Whatever It Takes Trust provides mental health and addiction services and deals with synthetics users every day. Its General Manager, Caroline Lamp, agrees tougher laws will help tackle supply, but she says better community-based addiction services to help addicts get clean and provide ongoing support once they've finished a treatment program are what's needed most.
If you front up to the Mental Health and Addiction Service and ask for help, you might be given an appointment that could be several weeks down the track. The other issue is that to go into a treatment program, the providers of those programs require people to be clean and sober. In other words, they have to have given up using before they go into the treatment program.
The Drug Foundation says funding for addiction services needs to double. And its chief executive, Ross Bell, says drug laws don't just need tweaking, they need a complete overhaul. In 2011, the Law Commission recommended treating drug suppliers and users differently, and Mr Bell says this would stop addicts being penalised for what should be a health issue.
If we were able to separate that out, and instead at that lower end refer people to help and make sure that help is available, that would be a good thing, and we would support the government's move. But at the moment, the law, which is over 40 years old, is a real blunt instrument, and unless the government reforms that law, then its good intentions of going after the big guys doesn't stop police from then also choosing to criminalise people who are using these drugs.
David Clark says changes to addiction services are coming, but the government's waiting for the final report from the Mental Health and Addiction Inquiry, which is due this month, before announcing any extra money. He says a decision on the reclassification will be made in the coming weeks, and the first report from the government's cross-agency team on synthetic cannabis is also due very soon. In Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
It's 18.5 minutes to 6. Freshwater insects, worms and snails, important food sources for many native fish and bird species, are under pressure. But scientists are divided about what this says about the overall state of our rivers. It's the first time macroinvertebrates have been included in the annual River Quality Report. The report's done by Land, Air, Water Aotearoa. This is a collaboration between the councils, the Ministry for the Environment and the Cawthron Institute. Ruth Hill has more.
Matthew Hall has been fishing the Rangitata River for 60 years. It's one of the braided rivers that winds from the Southern Alps across the Canterbury Plains, entering the Pacific northeast of Timaru. Mr Hall, a long-time member of the Fish and Game Council, says it's a different world from when he was a boy.
Thousands of salmon would come up the river from the sea each year to go to the spawning grounds to spawn, and sometimes to be 50, 60, 100 caught a day. Now, you're lucky if it's 1 or 2 caught a day, and you go for many days and there's none caught. The fishery's virtually gone.
The reasons for the decline of fish stock are complex. Irrigation, intensification of farming and small snowfalls mean river flows are low. But 10 years' worth of data released today show macroinvertebrates, freshwater insects, worms and snails, are likely or very likely degrading at 2 out of 5 sites being monitored. The project's lead researcher Tim Davey, Chief Scientist at Environment Canterbury, admits it's disappointing, but he doesn't think the overall picture is bleak.
The macroinvertebrates take a longer time to respond, and they respond to different things like climate, the amount of sediment and lots of different things. So they're a better overall indicator, but they do take longer to respond. We know that our river systems can take a long time for the macroinvertebrates to improve when you start doing things to improve them.
Dr Davies says it's positive to see improving trends for the 8 other water quality indicators, including clarity, turbidity, E. coli, nitrogen and phosphorus. However, Victoria University water scientist Mike Joy says snapshot samples of chemicals from sites selected by councils are giving a skewed result.
You can have what looks like improvements because the amount of nitrate's going down in the water, but what you haven't accounted for is the amount of algae that's gone up in the water, and that's why the invertebrates are showing virtually the opposite, because the invertebrates are wiped out. They can't survive because of oxygen depletion and their habitat being smothered by the algae. That's the invertebrates telling the true story that the reductions in nitrate aren't showing.
Mike Joy notes many areas are showing results which are not getting better or worse, and that's because it's hard to spot trends over a 10-year period. But for many of these sites, there is 25 years' worth of data available.
And when you look at 25 years, then nearly all of them are declining.
Jenny Webster-Brown from the Waterways Centre for Freshwater Management says almost all water monitoring shows that around a third of rivers, streams, lakes and groundwater have reduced quality due to human activities. She says previous national reports have looked at things that could affect the ecosystems, but this new data gives us the first robust statistical analysis of what's happening with the ecosystems themselves.
It's a canary in the coal mine sort of situation, isn't it? It's a clear indication that things are not right, and if that part of the ecosystem is suffering, then so will other parts of the ecosystem be suffering.
Professor Webster-Brown says New Zealanders can take encouragement from the fact some things are improving, but we need to look at what's not working and take action now. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
It's 5:45. Parliamentary Services refused to give permission for an investigation into the National Party leak to trawl through staffers' communications for the several months before the actual leak happened. Now, PwC is conducting the investigation to find who leaked details of Leader Simon Bridges' travel expenses to the media back in August. The terms of reference that were not made public at the time specified a forensic examination of any relevant databases or equipment used by MPs and staff working for them. MPs had to sign a waiver, you'll remember, allowing their communications to be examined back to February. An email sent to staff by Parliamentary Service on September the 25th detailed what would happen and offered support during an unsettling time, as they said. The Deputy Leader Paula Bennett told our political editor Jane Patterson there was always the possibility staff both working in Parliament and in other offices could be covered.
And so as a consequence of that, we've got Parliamentary Services as the employer. They're responsible for the terms of reference for parliamentary staff. They're responsible for communications with them, and we work with those that are MPs and are responsible for those ones. So it's quite clear. It's obviously looking for any traces of that original email that might have been printed, forwarded, and also regards to a phone number that was used in regards to the text.
So this would include staff inside Parliament, but also in electorate offices?
It could do, particularly if they've had any access to an MP's email or they've had access to the document.
But that would be quite usual, wouldn't it, that staff outside and support officers would have access to MP's emails?
It's not unusual. I wouldn't say that all of them do, but yeah, it's not unusual for staff to be able to be monitoring emails so that we can be getting back to people promptly and looking after constituents.
So would that be determined by the inquiry in terms of exactly which staff would be included?
Yeah, I suppose they've gone purposely quite broad. Actually, the terms of reference for staff are it's a shorter time frame than it is for MPs, so actually it's a bit more restricted, which I think is appropriate. And in the context of that, they would just be going through, collecting all of the data and then just looking for the document as to whether or not it's been forwarded or what's happened there.
So MPs were going back to February. What's the date that staff will go back to?
I believe it's the 1st of August.
Why the discrepancy or difference in the time frame for staff versus MPs?
Yeah, Parliamentary Services presented a strong argument in it being a bit more restricted as far as the staff were concerned. We'd already done the MPs one and we're interested in looking at sort of algorithms and language and going back a bit further from PwC's perspective. So we just respected Parliamentary Services as the employer.
So they basically said that staff should only be covered for the period basically around the time of the leak rather than any time before that?
Yes, that's correct.
Did they feel that it was an imposition on the privacy of those staff to go back further?
I'm not sure what their exact reasons were for it. I will say that it's a lot of information, and so restricting that time means that we're able to hopefully get through it a bit quicker, but we've only just received the data in regards to staff, and that's why the inquiry is also taking a bit longer.
So is that complete now in terms of the data from all of the staff that would be required for this inquiry?
I believe that they do have just about all of the data that they need at this stage, and so they can run the rest of it and hopefully get a report to us soon.
Have staff been at all concerned by the process? The email does offer support to staff who might feel a bit unsettled. They describe it as an unsettling time. What's the response been to becoming included in this inquiry?
Certainly I've heard nothing from staff, and in fact my own out-of-Parliament staff only contacted me this morning to say they had received an email a couple of weeks ago and hadn't thought anything further of it. And so I certainly hadn't expressed anything there. I know that our Chief of Staff works closely with our staff in Parliament, but I must say I haven't heard concerns from them. At the end of the day, we're all pretty busy and getting on with the job at hand.
That's Nationals Deputy Leader Paula Bennett speaking to our political editor Jane Patterson. Parliamentary Service is making no comment. It's 10 minutes to 6. Why do so many Māori end up behind bars? A new study of 900 Māori found an overwhelming majority believed structural racism was to blame. And as Te Anua Hori Hanganui reports, ex-prisoners agree with them.
Black Power member Eugene Ryder was a victim of state abuse, a gang prospect at 15, and served a prison sentence for robbing a bank in his early adulthood. He says at every stage in his early life, he can see how racism played a part in his pathway to prison.
Right from primary school. And then from there, when I went into the state system as a ward of the state, I experienced it even more there, where Māori were seen, even within those systems, as second class. And what's scary is that some of the people that were portraying that type of racial behaviour didn't realise that was wrong.
More than 90% of people involved in the There Our Whānau report agree. Activist group Action Station and the University of Otago reached out to iwi and hapu groups for the report and surveyed more than 900 people to see what Māori thought about the justice system. Most of them thought structural racism, intergenerational trauma and colonisation was the reason Māori made up 51% of the prison population. The director of Action Station, Laura O'Connell-Rapira, says the findings were deeply moving.
What I experienced reading through all of the responses we got from our survey participants was actually these are real people. These aren't statistics on a report. For every single person that is in our prisons right now, there is at least one whānau that is affected by this.
Prisons didn't exist before settlers arrived in New Zealand, but they were quickly erected following the establishment of British law. Ms Rapira says the systemic racism and oppression of Māori that followed has largely contributed to what she calls New Zealand's justice crisis.
In order to fix our justice crisis, we actually need to look at economic deprivation in Māori communities, and that again comes back to our colonial history. That Māori land was taken away, and so with the loss of that economic power, that has pushed people into modes of survival, and those modes of survival, those acts of crime, are now punished by our justice system.
Awatea Mita was incarcerated in 2013 and spent just under 2 years in prison. As the daughter of Indigenous rights activist Mereta Mita, she says facing racism was a common experience growing up.
We had negative childhood interactions with criminal justice system actors, such as the police. So our family, because of my mother's political activism, mainly through the 81 Springbok tour, we were targeted by police. So it was very overt kind of harassment.
The survey found most people thought greater whānau support, higher incomes and connected communities could help reduce incarceration rates. Ms Mita, who now works with ex-inmates to reintegrate them into society, says Māori perspectives to improving the justice system need to be heard.
The great hope of the future in having this report is that we can, Māori and Pākehā, in confirmation of our treaty partner relationship, listen to one another, support one another as we work together towards reducing the harms caused by the current criminal justice system.
The research has come after the appointment of a justice working group set up by the government to improve the justice system. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko te aniwa, hurihanga nui ahau.
At 6 minutes to 6, it's an expensive wee dram. The world's rarest and most valuable bottle of whiskey has just been sold in Edinburgh for a record £848,000. Now that's about 1.7 million New Zealand dollars. The bottle of Macallan Valerio Adami was distilled back in 1926 and bottled 60 years later. The auction attracted bids from buyers and collectors around the world, and the BBC's Lorna Gordon was there.
At an auction in Edinburgh this morning, a record-breaking bottle of whiskey. With the buyer's premium, this costing well over £800,000.
Only 12 of these bottles were ever produced, and such is its rarity that this auction has attracted interest from around the world, with bids coming in from China and the Far East.
The buyer has chosen to stay anonymous, but a little more is known about the seller. He's said to be a private collector based in Britain who loves his whiskey, and who only realised the value of his Macallan bottle when a similar one was sold at auction in Hong Kong earlier this year.
Whisky connoisseurs would say this is one of the holy grails of Scotch whisky, because it's so rare to have a 60-year-old whisky distilled in 1926. It's almost a work of art because it's in a copy of a spirit still safe. It's beautiful to look at.
Of those 12 original bottles, experts say it's thought one was destroyed in an earthquake in Japan, while another has been opened and consumed. It's not known whether today's buyer plans to have a tipple.
That's Lorna Gordon there from Edinburgh at 4 minutes, or coming up to 4 minutes to 6. A new crew of police pups are ready for action this week, having graduated from their police training college today. The dogs and their handlers had a special ceremony to mark the occasion, and for one pair it fulfilled a lifelong dream. Mariana Johnson was there.
Tior, Ace and Paikea are the latest dogs to graduate from the Police Dog Training Centre in Trentham. It's a special occasion for the owners whose dogs become part of the family. Constable Regan Mohine has handled 2 dogs before, but says Paikea is a bit special.
Paikea's the only one I've had from 8 weeks. The other 2 I got when they were a little bit older, so I don't think the bond was as good. And they each had their strengths. It's hard to say, at this stage, just graduating today, what Paikea's going to be like on the street, but I'm pretty confident he's going to be a good dog.
He's worked with Paikea every day for the last 22 months. Mohine says the dogs live with him and the family are even taking Paikea on a holiday in the snow. Today also marks Constable Mohine's return to dog handling after being shot in the head during an Armed Offenders Squad operation 2 years ago.
In short, we cleared an address and I managed to get shot. As a result of it, I required brain surgery. I actually come back to the street middle of last year, back to full duties. However, I sort of come off my medication and a couple of days later I had a seizure in my sleep, which basically set me back a year.
But Constable Mohine says now it's back to business, using his tried and true methods. The first stage is creating trust with the dog before teaching them to track using treats as positive reinforcement. The training centre's practice leader, Senior Sergeant Chris Best, says today's recruits are some of the best.
We've got a really good breeding stock and we've done a lot of work around our development, puppy development. So we're training them from a younger age, but we're also using positive reinforcement.
About 20 to 30 patrol dogs a year graduate from the training school. But Sergeant Best says they can't train for every situation.
We all know that you can only mask so much, and when the chips are down, the dog does have to stand on its own 2 feet, but it's no different than doing scenarios with recruits. We've got to prepare our dogs the best we can to take that one.
For Constable Adam Johansson, today marks a milestone in his police career. He joined the police 5 years ago with the goal of becoming a dog handler. It's not easy making the grade. All dog handlers have to be selected for the Armed Offenders Squad and then adopt a puppy. And Constable Johansson says there were a few nerves going into today's graduation ceremony.
Nervous, to say the least. She's quite a defensive dog. She likes to look after myself and herself, and I was a bit worried about shaking the Commissioner's hand and her lunging at him, because it's gone that way a couple of times in practice. So yeah, we were quite relieved that there were no bites.
The newly qualified dogs will be hitting the streets in the Tasman, Southern and Tamaki Makaurau districts this week. For Checkpoint, ko Mariana Johnson tēnei.
Thanks, Mariana. Just coming up to 6 o'clock, a little bit more feedback, more on Russia actually. It seems to be the topic that's getting your attention tonight. Peter's been in touch and he says Vladimir Putin may be right. It's not Russia, i.e. the government. Since the breakup of the Soviet Union, the place is seething with criminals, Peter says, who work for themselves, selling hacks to the highest bidder. Thanks for your point of view. Another texter says the GCSB is trying to drag us into an anti-Russia alliance. Where is the evidence? There's a call there for a bit more documentation, perhaps from the GCSB. They might not be able to give it to us. Another texter says, I heard a member of the IT staff at a large school say he stopped hundreds or thousands of Russian hacks most weeks. I could hardly believe it, but I do now. We'll have Sir Bruce Ferguson, after 6 o'clock. For more on this, as well as information about 3,000 customers from Network Tasman in Mapua through Motere have their power off. That will take about 4 hours to get back on.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The head of the GCSB says Five Eyes partners have gone public today over Russia cyber attacks in order to send the message that all countries are expected to stick to the rules. The Bureau is backing new British accusations that Russia's military intelligence agency, the GRU, has directed a host of attacks aimed at undermining Western democracies. In April, Jacinda Ardern would not directly condemn Russia, saying she would await advice from the GCSB. Andrew Hampton, who heads the agency, has told Checkpoint there's now a strong message from the Five Eyes countries.
What we're seeing today is a number of like-minded countries stating publicly that they have established that there are links between the Russian government, in particular Russian military intelligence, and a malicious cyber campaign which has been underway for a number of years.
Andrew Hampton of the GCSB. Nearly 130 jobs could be axed at a West Auckland packaging plant as part of the business's move to Asia. The Hutamaki Group says its plan will affect 128 workers, but it's hopeful of employing some of them in other parts of the business. The Air 2 union says it's a devastating blow for workers there. It says its 150 members at the Henderson plant are yet to learn who will stay and who will go. But if all 128 jobs are lost, Hutamaki will have laid off 260 people in 8 years. The Foreign Minister isn't ruling out further aid for Sulawesi, the Indonesian region hit by a massive earthquake and tsunami last Friday. Winston Peters is on a scheduled visit to the capital, Jakarta, where he is to meet Indonesian ministers. Earlier today, he announced another $3 million worth of aid, bringing New Zealand's total contribution so far to a value of $5 million.
This is a substantial contribution, and I don't know whether it's the limit of what we can do, but at this point in time, it is seriously appreciated by the Indonesian government that we are doing it.
Winston Peters. The death toll from the quake and tsunami has now exceeded 1,400. The Green Party says the Health Minister's push to reclassify 2 synthetic compounds as Class A drugs is destined to fail. David Clark says reclassification of the 2 most widely used compounds will allow stricter penalties and give the police greater powers to search properties and seize drugs. But the Greens law reform spokesperson Chloe Swarbrick says the makeup of synthetics is constantly changing, so the government will always be playing catch-up. She says harsher penalties punish users who need medical care, not jail time. Rachel McGregor's lawyer has told a court that Colin Craig didn't tell his client he was going to respond publicly to speculation about their relationship. The former Conservative Party leader is suing Ms McGregor for defamation, and she is countersuing. The case centres on comments made about the confidential settlement the pair reached over a sexual harassment claim and a financial dispute, and rumours about the nature of their relationship. Closing his case in the High Court in Auckland today, Ms McGregor's lawyer, Hayden Wilson, said Mr Craig didn't give his former press secretary any warning about what he was going to say.
He never put to her directly his belief that she was behind the rumour and speculation. He never accepted the assurances given to him that she was not. And she found out about these statements via the media.
Hayden Wilson. In his closing arguments, Mr Craig, who is representing himself, said Ms McGregor could not claim the defence of truth because her sexual harassment claims were false.
Ms McGregor's central allegation is that I sexually harassed her, and it's a retrospective remembering or recreation of our relationship.
Colin Craig. Justice Hinton is expected to reserve her decision. Australian air safety experts are investigating why the pilot of a United Airlines flight with 239 passengers on board was forced to make an emergency landing at Sydney Airport this morning. A mayday call was received from the plane as it circled above the city. The ABC's Angelique Liu reports.
The mayday procedure was triggered automatically at about 6 this morning when the pilot reported running low on fuel near the end of the flight from Los Angeles. Emergency services were placed on standby and roads around the airport were closed briefly as a precaution while the pilot landed safely. Safety regulator Air Services Australia says passengers were not at risk. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau is reviewing what happened this morning.
Angelique Liu in Sydney. It's 6:05. To sport, the All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says he wants to see how Sonny Bill Williams and Jack Goodhue perform together at test level after naming the pair to start in this weekend's clash with South Africa in Pretoria. He says they're yet to settle on their first choice midfield and they want to see how Williams goes with the informed Goodhue.
He's playing very well and we want to see that combination of him and Sonny. We last saw it in the French series, so we know a lot about Brian and Jack, but we don't know a lot about Sonny and Jack. So all year we've been trying to work out what's our best combination in that area for the future.
Steve Hansen. Silver Ferns coach Nolene Taurua has made tweaks to each area of the court for the Constellation Cup against Australia. Getting the chance to add to her 7 tests, young shooter Maya Wilson replaces Amelia-Ann Ekanasio, while defenders Sulu Fitzpatrick and Erekana Pedersen also come into the New Zealand side. The 2 others to drop out for the 4-test series, which starts in Brisbane on Sunday, are Karen Berger and Alessia Peta Toava. A late change has helped the New Zealand Breakers come within 2 shots of an upset win over NBA team the Phoenix Suns in their pre-season basketball clash in Arizona. The Suns led by 15 going into the final quarter, but the Breakers closed the gap to 4 before going down 91-86. Corey Webster shone for the visitors with 27 points. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, in the lead-up to the 2018 APRA Silver Scrolls, music reviewer Jeremy Taylor looks back at Scrolls past, the winners, and the ones who should have won, but didn't. Then once the music world has picked its favourite song for this year, a later-than-usual edition of Our Changing World looks at the New Zealand project to turn poo into plastic. That's Nights with me, Brian Crump. New adventures in constipation. After the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, rain possibly heavy today, gradually easing tomorrow. Auckland, Coromandel, Waikato and Bay of Plenty, partly cloudy. Isolated showers mainly in the afternoon and evening. Waitonga to Manawatu, including the central high country, cloudy periods with isolated afternoon showers today. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, isolated showers about the ranges and a few showers about southern Wairarapa tomorrow evening. Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington, cloudy periods, isolated showers tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine today, partly cloudy with a few showers tomorrow. Buller and Westland, occasional rain, heavy at times south of the glaciers, but gradually easing to showers tomorrow. Canterbury, patchy rain spreading north today, clearing south of Ashburton tomorrow. Otago and Southland, scattered rain today, mainly fine tomorrow, but a few showers about Southland and Clutha. Fiordland, rain with heavy falls easing this evening, showers tomorrow, and for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with showers tomorrow evening. It's just gone 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much, Katrina. That basketball result, 5 points in it. The Breakers and the Phoenix. It was Phoenix Suns, wasn't
Phoenix
it?
Suns, yes, amazing.
Probably didn't expect to get that close to them, right?
No, well, they were 15 points down at the beginning of the 4th quarter, and they clawed
back 2-3 points, and we would have won.
Yeah, amazing.
And
well, at least tied.
Yeah,
yeah.
True.
Let's go 2 3-pointers would have been perfect.
Would have been amazing. Stephen Adams as well got voted, I think, from some of the management in the NBA as the toughest player in the whole NBA.
Awesome.
We're doing all right, eh?
Yeah, we're great. They just have to know it, that's all.
That's right, that's right. Hopefully they're tuning in. Thank you for tuning in to Checkpoint tonight. We do have more coming up on the GCSB. I will get that right by the end of the program. Of course, allegations of Russian hacking. But first, we did want to clarify something we announced just before the news because we didn't really give it much. There just wasn't much time. Nelson Tasman, if you're in the Nelson Tasman area and without power, here's why. Network Tasman has got in touch. They say there was an incident on the Appleby Highway and that's cut power to about 3,000 of its customers. A fair few people there affected. This is in the Mapua through to Motere areas and it happened about 4 o'clock this afternoon. This is all south of the town of Tasman. Network Tasman says repair work will take about 4 hours once line crews are given access to the site. So bear with them there and perhaps expect the power to come on a bit later tonight there if you are in the Nelson Tasman area. The Prime Minister says New Zealand is now willing to call out Russia for its involvement in international cyber attacks. The GCSB is backing new accusations by Britain that Russia's military intelligence agency has directed a host of cyber attacks aimed at undermining Western democracies. It says it's joined with other countries to send a strong message to countries determined to flout international rules. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The GCSB has established clear links between the Russian government and cyber attacks on overseas political institutions, businesses, media and sporting organisations. That includes the US Democratic National Committee and the World Anti-Doping Agency. Britain says the attacks have caused significant harm and millions of dollars in economic damage. The head of the GCSB, Andrew Hampton, says there's now a strong message from countries including New Zealand.
What we're seeing today is a number of like-minded countries stating publicly that they have established that there are links between the Russian government, in particular Russian military intelligence, and a malicious cyber campaign which has been underway for a number of years.
Back in April, the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern would not join Five Eyes partners in directly condemning Russia after a spate of cyber attacks, saying she'd await advice from the GCSB. Now she says she has that advice and confirmation.
We've already seen some discussion around cybersecurity attacks already. This is acknowledging that there is evidence to demonstrate who has been at fault here, and we need to call out that behaviour when it occurs.
The Foreign Minister Winston Peters has come under fire for his reluctance to condemn Russia in the past. When asked if New Zealand would deal with Russia on the likes of trade in the future, he indicated there may be some reconsideration.
We all said a lot of things before the election, before Salisbury and before a number of other events. And it's probably unfair to try and hold someone to circumstances that may have changed dramatically, thereby calling into relevance to the comments that were made years and years ago.
Both the GCSB and Jacinda Ardern say while New Zealand has not been the direct target in these specific attacks, it's important to remain vigilant and make sure cybersecurity software is up to date. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Sir Bruce Ferguson was the director of the GCSB from 2006 to 2011. He told me, judging by what Andrew Hampton has made public today, the threat of cyber warfare has intensified as technology continues to advance.
Even when I was in GCSB, I was very clear that we had to be careful and had to be on guard for all potential cyber threats. Now, the actual threat regime has presumably increased enormously since I was there, and what I mean by that is the technological advances by all countries who are able to do this is a quantum leap from in my time. So I would be saying right now, whatever he has said, it is probably absolutely true. We need to be on guard for that. And it's not just Russia. There are many other state actors out there who would dearly like to get their hands on some of the stuff that we do, like our intellectual property. There's enormous things. We just have to safeguard our own national interests. At the moment, Andrew is concentrating on Russia. He's no doubt got very good reason to do that. I'm not in a position to verify that or negate it, but I would absolutely believe it.
Now, you're saying we need to be on guard. There's not a lot of specific information in what the GSB has said in terms of what everyday people can do about this. Yes, it has been 7 years or so since you finished with the GCSB, and yes, technology moves so rapidly. Is it simply just a matter of us effectively updating our antivirus?
No, it's more complex than that. I don't generally feel that Andrew's talking about the general person in the street getting scammed by the Russians or any other state actor for that matter. I think we're talking much more strategic than that in our national secrets, our alliances, our cooperation with other countries. That what he's saying that we have to be very much on guard that Russia does not somehow penetrate that, not only us but the others, and thereby cause a major concern and a threat to our own national security. Because national security is not just military; it's all sorts of things. Just our intellectual property, for starters. As I said, if someone can get into there, or our electoral process, we've seen what allegedly has happened in America, what could have happened in Great Britain, and it could well happen here. We've got to be very careful that we don't have other state actors trying to influence, presumably badly or in their own best interests, our own systems. And I think the getting into any electoral system in a democratic country would be disastrous.
Yeah, and we're in an environment, of course, where people are talking about moving to online voting in upcoming elections. Against such a superpower as Russia, are you confident that we have the tech tools to be able to defend ourselves?
Well, I can't state from my position whether I'm confident or not in that, because I'm out of touch with the advances in the 7 years since I've been out. But I have no doubt at all that the GCSB and the government, and it's various, the two governments involved, have been absolutely adamantly trying to get our safeguards up to the standard that they have to be. Now, Russia is a major power. I personally wouldn't call it a superpower, but in the way of cyber effects, it is very, very powerful, and that's what Andrew is actually warning us about. And no doubt the United States, certainly I read the one about Great Britain, they've come out and said the same thing. Basically saying, don't get caught with your pants down. These guys are a real threat to our way of life, and I don't mean militarily that, but all sorts of other economic particularly. So we have to be a guard against it and don't let them interfere with us.
Sir Bruce Ferguson, a former boss of the GCSB, with some advice there. It's 16 minutes past 6. In the United States, a senior Republican senator says President Donald Trump may have to give up his tax returns, something he's obviously consistently refused to do over the years. The chair of the Senate's Finance Committee says he would be happy to look into claims made in an article in the New York Times yesterday that Mr. Trump helped his parents dodge taxes back in the 1990s, including what it says were instances of outright fraud. CNN's Brian Todd has this report.
I started with $1 million loan. I built a company that's worth more than $10 billion, okay?
A self-built billionaire, not according to the New York Times, which says a steady and secret flow of cash from Fred Trump started very early. By age 3, the Times says, Donald Trump was earning $200,000 a year from his father's real estate empire. He was a millionaire by age 8. After college, he was receiving the equivalent of $1 million a year from his father and more than $5 million annually in his 40s and 50s. In all, the Times calculates Trump's father gave him over $400 million in 2018 dollars. The White House?
The president brought his father into a lot of deals, and they made a lot of money together. The allegations of fraud and tax evasion are 100% false.
The president? That's just a very old, boring, and often told hit piece on me.
Money, that's my business, right? I keep taking.
But how could such a thing be done? The Times provides detailed accounts of an alleged family conspiracy to use shady business practices to transfer a vast fortune while putting one over on tax officials. For example, the Times says the kids set up a shell company to purchase items for their father's buildings. But when it bought something like a $300 air conditioner and the bill went to Dad,
they would charge $100 more and they would pocket that.
This would have allowed the father to give his children countless secret cash gifts disguised as business expenses.
The scope of it is hundreds of millions of dollars.
Come to the castle in Atlantic City. It's more than a hotel. It's a 4-star resort.
When Donald Trump's casino business began falling apart, the Times says his father sent an emissary who bought $3.35 million worth of casino chips and left without placing a bet, another hidden infusion of money. Through it all, the Times claims the family generated a paper trail that steadily hid the money, at one point claiming some properties were worth just over $41 million, then selling them over the next decade for 16 times that amount. A statement from the family said all appropriate gift and estate tax returns were filed and the required taxes were paid.
Despite that, according to the Times, all of this helped Donald Trump and his siblings dodge hundreds of millions of dollars in tax bills. Again, Trump's camp says it's just not true, but critics have long insisted there is a reason Donald Trump is the only modern president who, to this day, has refused to release his taxes.
Brian Todd reporting at 6:19. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have made their first official visit to Sussex. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle toured the county where they saw a rare copy of the American Declaration of Independence and spoke to a charity which supports survivors of sexual assault. BBC royal correspondent Sarah Campbell was there.
Chichester, the first Sussex city to fly the flag for the new Duke and Duchess.
There were handshakes with as many people as possible. In a nod to Meghan's country of birth, the couple were shown the rare Sussex copy of the American Declaration of Independence.
Wow, that's so revealed lots.
To Bognor Regis and a musical interlude at a new university technology park, with the obligatory and fairly low-tech plaque unveil.
So who's talking?
In Brighton, a change of pace, knitting with a charity which works with survivors of sexual abuse.
Before today, Meghan hadn't set foot inside this county, and now she's here as the first ever Duchess of Sussex. It continues to be quite a year for the former actress from Los Angeles.
Good at the job. Meghan's beautiful. Nice and also I like because they're not so royalty. They're like, they will give people high fives and everything.
A hit in Sussex. Later this month, the couple will be taking their high fives down under as they embark on their first major foreign tour.
Sarah Campbell with that report from Sussex. The APRA Silver Scrolls are New Zealand's top songwriting awards, with Marlon Williams, Chelsea Jade, Troy Kingi, The Beths and Unknown Mortal Orchestra all in the running. They're being held at Auckland's Spark Arena, from where RNZ's Music's Alex Bean joins us via live view. Good evening to you, Alex.
Kia ora, Perite, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing very well and you're looking very dapper. What's the atmosphere there? It's all building as it starts in, what, about half an hour's time?
Yeah, it's electric, to be honest. This is my Christmas, Alex. A lot of people enjoy the Vodafone New Zealand Music Awards, which happen every year, but this, to me, is the real award each year. This award is for the musicians, it's voted for by the musicians, and it recognises only songwriting, which is a weird little craft. What makes a good song? Is it a hook? Is it a melody? Is it a memorable lyric? Well, all of those things combine. This year, we have 5 amazing finalists. 4 really happy, joyful songs and 1 utterly miserable, heartbreaking epic of a tune, which I think a lot of people are going to put as the favourite. We've got the Beths in there, we've got Unknown Mortal Orchestra, we've got Troy Kingi, Chelsea Jade with one of the greatest pop songs that New Zealand has ever produced, and Marlon Williams with Nobody Gets What They Want Anymore. The arena is filling up with well-dressed musicians on their best behaviour. Currently, the free wine and dinner, which takes place just after 7 o'clock, may see some of that off. I'd like to bring in a friend of mine if I could. Ms. Mania Porto, could I grab you for just a second? Come over here and join Checkpoint. Hello, Moana, how are you?
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
You look very flash tonight.
Thank you very much, as do you. Now, 2 years ago here, you were yourself inducted into the New Zealand Hall of Fame. Beautiful, proud moment for you.
It was.
If John Campbell was here, he'd ask how your mother was, I know, because...
Mum would go, I'm fine, please yourself. Gee, that was a moment.
It was a moment. He came right down into the audience, he spoke to your mum. I presume that still gets told at family dinners.
I remember
and
him
things like
saying, shall I call you Bernadette or Bernie? And she's, please yourself, please yourself.
Please.
Oh, well, I'll call you Bernadette because we've only just met.
Sure.
What a charmer.
What an absolute... Your mum or John Campbell?
Both of them.
Both of them, indeed. And Moana, I wanted to ask you, not only as a Hall of Fame member and you know, the winner of many awards yourself, but as a kuia, as an old lady.
I'm not a kuia. I think I might actually punch you in the head.
An older,
there could be blood
well-respected
on the
lady.
Oh my God.
As somebody that's been around the music industry for a little while,
what are you digging a frickin' hole?
What were the Silver Scrolls like before they were this flash?
Hey, I didn't really come to them before they were this flash. I think the first one I went to, it was my first date with my partner Toby, so that was 1998, and that was at the Town Hall. So I never went to them before that. I was slow off the rank.
Right.
I'd go to the Music Awards, and then I discovered that one, and I thought, this is way more fun.
It is, because there's less celebrity, there's less glitz and glamour, and people...
It's about the songs.
Yeah.
And I mean, I look at all the finalists this year and I think it's apples and pears really, because they're all different. The songs have all got their own quality, and but it is about the song, the songwriting, as opposed to how many views you've got or whatever, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's always hard to quantify what makes a good song, but sometimes there's that magical ingredient.
But I'm rapt that Jenny Morris is a Hall of Famer. I only met her this year.
Wow.
Like about 2 months ago.
And what a legacy,
Oh.
what a woman. Her contribution to the music industry since she stopped singing even has been
That's
superb
right,
and so
because
important.
there's musicians and there's writers, but there's advocates, and she's a strong advocate.
Yeah, no.
So I'm just wrapped.
As are you, Moana. As are you.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you.
Not
Have
a
a great
kuya,
evening.
though.
Not a kuya. Not a kuya.
I got all hot and flushed there.
I got a little hot and flushed.
I might go now.
Also, see you later on, Moana. We are, of course, covering the Silver Scrolls across RNZ tonight. Alex, I'm sure you've got all the details on that.
Yes, we do, and thank you. You're looking great. You're looking a little bit more flushed, but it goes with your sort of purple shirt, so you're looking great.
Pink, I think, but yeah. All right, thanks, Alex.
Pink. Hey, thank you, Alex. Have a great night. Soak it all up. And, of course, if you are listening, you can tune in and just stay tuning in, really, because we're covering the Silver Scrolls from 7 p.m. right here on RNZ National. You can go to our website, rnz.co.nz/music for the online coverage. It's all being live streamed. You can watch it and listen to it there and see who are the winners. It's coming up to 26 minutes past 6. Bit of a public service announcement, really. A Tauranga resident is looking to reunite a goldfish with its owner after her cat dragged it in for breakfast. Remarkably, the goldfish is still alive, albeit missing a few scales and a slightly battered tail. And it's all Lisa Lyon's fault. She slept in yesterday morning, failing to feed her cat Indy at the customary time of 6:30 a.m. So the feline went out and grabbed a cheeky little takeaway. From where? Well, Lisa can't be sure.
It's school holidays and I've got 2 little boys, so they'd come into my bed early in the morning and I said, do you want to have a snuggle with Mummy? And we just ended up lying in bed and talking and things, and so the cats didn't get fed at their normal 6:30 a.m. And when we eventually got down into the kitchen, it was about 8 o'clock and I'd fed the kids, and then in walked Indy through the cat door with something in her mouth, which I actually thought at a first glance was like a bird, because that's what she normally brings in sometimes, covered in blood. And I was like, shit, what's that in her mouth? So I said to the kids, oh no. So I said, get out, Indy. And she kept walking towards the laundry where she gets fed. And then she dropped this thing on the floor. So I grabbed my phone because I didn't want to go close to it and zoomed in to take a picture because yuck. And realised it was a bloody goldfish and it was still breathing. So it was like flipping its tail around on the floor and like doing the whole breathing with its mouth thing. And so I grabbed some toilet paper and picked up its tail because I thought, oh, yuck, and stuck it in a small bowl of water, and it was covered in looks like dirt and kind of sand. And the first bowl of water, quickly I realised it was too small because it was flapping around in it. So I grabbed the biggest Tupperware bowl I could find and just filled it up with water and put it in. And it swam around in there and was swimming around. And my son said, Mum, it's breathing, like it's fine. And I frantically got on the Facebook page, the local one, and asked if anybody had lost a goldfish from a pond, I thought, outside.
Right. Hey, Lisa, can I butt in there? So this fish, you picked this fish up, it's gone back in the bowl. I've seen the photos that you shared on Facebook, and it was not looking good at all. And in fact, it's missing, about half its scales?
Oh, yeah, so it's got scales missing on both sides, obviously from being in her mouth.
Right.
And
it seems to have, it's still surviving to this minute.
Yeah, it's still swimming around in the pond down the road where we've put it.
Oh, you've put it in the pond already?
Yeah, I've put it in a friend's pond because I can't find its owner.
Right. So, Lisa, you've put the word out there on Facebook to try to find the owner. How sure are you that it has been plucked from someone's goldfish bowl rather than a public pond?
Yeah, I know. I've got no idea. So I am only assuming it was from an outdoor pond because it had dirt and things on it, but maybe she had dropped it on the ground and then picked it up again to bring it home to me.
Right.
I hope nobody's missing a fish from their goldfish bowl because they'll be bloody confused.
So your boys have had a bit more excitement this week, something to remember from the school holidays, but I guess this is all your fault for sleeping in.
I know, and I mean, I've walked around neighbours with the fish in the bowl, and the neighbour said, just flush it down the loo, and I was like, no, I can't, he's breathing. And my kids were like, take it to the SPCA, Mum, you have to make sure it can live, and so now it's living in a friend's pond down the road until the owner comes forward, or if they don't, she's got a new goldfish and they've named him Whiskers.
Lisa Lyons, who's no longer in possession of said goldfish, but knows where it is. So if you are missing a prize goldfish, do get in touch. We will connect you to Lisa and Indy the cat. That's Checkpoint for this evening. Thanks for joining us on your radio, your TV, online, or however you've got in touch. Catch up on our stories on the website rnz.co.nz, and we'll see you for the last day of the week tomorrow. Ka kite anō.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The GCSB boss says today's statement condemning Russia's military intelligence agency cyber attacks sends a strong message from all Five Eyes partners. The E2 union says Hutamaki workers are devastated by the announcement of nearly 130 job cuts at the West Auckland packaging plant. Winston Peters says New Zealand may give further aid to quake-hit Sulawesi on top of the $5 million announced so far. The Green Party says the government's bid to curb synthetic drugs by reclassifying 2 compounds is doomed to fail as the drug's makeup is consistently changing. And nearly 500 people have registered so far to take part in the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Historical State Care Abuse. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Growing visitor numbers are putting pressure on conservation land.
It's our little patch, and to see it trashed is not good.